I want to talk to you today, Andrew, about one, your Substack article about the Notebook LM stuff.
Yes,
because
with Google's Gemini, yes.
Yes, because artificial intelligence and podcasts, well, we're sitting here using artificial intelligence and we're recording a podcast today. So, what do you say? Should we just jump into it?
We should absolutely jump in, because, I feel as if I'm old here. I'm sure everybody else has discovered this before me, but I was blown away by this capability that you now have to get AI to make a podcast.
Initializing waveform.
Modulating signals for transmission.
Exploring the possible, probable, and preferable futures.
Welcome to Modem Futura. Welcome to Modem Futura. I'm Sean Lakey, here with my colleague, Andrew Maynard.
Hi.
And let's just jump right into it.
Sounds good. So you've listened to the stuff, haven't you?
Yes.
We should probably say what this is.
Yes.
So, was it Notebook LM? I've got to get this right. It's Google's Notebook LM. So this is Google's platform as part of their sort of ecosystem, where you can put stuff in, whether it's notes, web links, or documents, and you can start sort of having conversations with it, with the AI sort of being the other part of the conversation.
Yeah.
But here's the really cool, weird, disturbing thing. They have an experimental feature where you can get AI to create an audible summary of your material. And it does this audible summary by creating a podcast. And you have two podcast hosts who banter between each other in crazily human ways. So it's sort of based on a really engaging podcast between two people talking about material. They bring in other perspectives and sources when they're discussing your material. It's full of interjections and breaths and sort of humor and stuff like that. And it sounds crazy realistic.
I know. Yes. And I'm like, is there banter better than real banter? I don't know. It
actually gets a little tiring after a while. So I wrote this Substack where I think I have 4 of these or something. And by the 4th, I was getting a little tired listening to them.
Yeah. And so you're right. So I just want to back up. So Notebook LM, I think the origins of it, right, it was in response to all, the AI arms race, if you will, between OpenAI and between Google. And it was a specific response to I'm going to use air quotes, so you have to imagine me putting these on, of the hallucinations.
Yes.
Right. So when you ask, traditionally you feed documents and information into ChatGPT, and you would ask it questions, and you could never be the confidence level was low around the accuracy of that info, especially early on. It's gotten better, but so Notebook LM was essentially their response to this issue of, even from Gemini, their own version, was, we're going to create one that just deeply investigates the information that you've given, nothing
and it's
else.
Constrained by it.
Right. So it's not going off and being influenced by tokens from its training models. It's really looking specifically at what you've given it.
Yep.
And before, when was this announced? Last week? It
was a couple of weeks ago, I think.
A couple of weeks.
Yes. Yep.
So before then, it still did really interesting things where you could have it do summary tests. You could query questions about, for example, I threw one together before we recorded our previous episode, when I talked a little bit about that H.G. Wells piece. I threw that in because it's in public domain.
Yep.
Threw that in there, and right away it gives you a summary. But then it gives you suggested questions, but you can then ask your own, tell me more about this, and how does this compare to that? And you get that magic sauce, if you will, from a generative AI tool. But again, it's constrained to the information that you give it predominantly. But now, as you mentioned, they are and this isn't the first we've had Gen AI created, again, I'll use air quotes, podcasting or audio content. It's just the first time it's actually good.
Yes, it is. But also, if you look at this, this is fascinating because there are hallucinations in the podcast version, because it tries to sort of bring in these inferences from other areas.
Yep.
But it also uses techniques such as metaphor.
Yeah.
So it takes something out of the information you've provided, and then the host will say, it's like ...
Yep.
It's like your car and it's broken down. You're trying to fix it. So nothing that's in the original material. They're making stuff up to try and enrich it.
And try to boost it.
Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's crazy. But then something else I discovered with this, and this is where I was both excited and really concerned. It is very hard to rationally filter what you're hearing if you're hearing it going straight into your ears.
Yeah.
So I was listening to these, and as I was listening, I knew all the material I put in. I was thinking, is that right? Is that correct? Is that made up? And I couldn't tell. I began doubting myself because they sound so convincing when they talk about it. So there's one there on this Substack, which is talking about the school we're sitting in, ASU School for the Future of Innovation and Society. And it was talking about the incredible centers in this school, and it mentioned a couple of centers. And I thought, I don't remember those centers. And I tried to Google them. I couldn't find them. But even so, even though I couldn't find them on Google, I was thinking, am I missing something?
Right.
They sound,
do they exist for a short period of time?
as if they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Maybe it's me that doesn't know.
Well,
there's something about listening to a voice that weasels its way into your mind.
It's a different, and probably, I mean, this is where we need to get someone with cognitive science. It's probably different parts of your brain are activated, whether you're reading it or listening to it, right?
Yep.
And also, to be honest, this is kind of the funny thing. I'm sitting here going, we're now going to be gaslit by like it always existed. What are you talking about? And you're like, wait, what?
Right.
What? Wait, what? You can even feed it stuff like, I did this. I was like, well, let me play with this. I threw it my own website.
Yep.
And then and it's like one of these things, the same kind of thing. You're like,
comes back and says, you're the man, Sean.
I felt so good about myself. But it was funny though, that I think I came to you and told you afterwards, I'm like, it was kind of shameful to admit how easily the flattery worked.
Right.
Where I was like, this is not that good, but it is saying really nice things about me. So, maybe
it's not so bad.
Not so bad.
Yep.
I mean, and to be honest, who doesn't need a personal hype
Right.
We could all benefit from that. There's so much negativity in the world. We could all benefit from a little.
So what nobody knows is you've got this on a personal loop. You've got your headphones on. All you're doing is listening.
Right now. I only have one ear connected to our podcast. The other ear is just, you're doing great, Sean.
Sean, you're so good.
So the best. Has anyone done this better? I don't know. It's wild. So let me play a little bit, because I think if I remember correctly in this version that it created, and again, the magic sauce of this stuff and how much energy are we burning running this thing, but it did this in, 2 minutes or less. It built this thing, but I think if I remember correctly, the AI podcast authors will pull, and again, this thing with H.G. Wells has nothing to do about Time Machine, and they referenced his other works, which is interesting. So let me I'll just play just a moment, a couple seconds of it until we get sick of it or threatened by it. One of the two.
Welcome to today's deep dive, and we are going way beyond the Time Machine today to explore really the mind of H.G. Wells.
Yeah.
You might know him for like his iconic sci-fi, but this guy, he was also a pretty forward-thinking social commentator.
Absolutely.
Like really, really ahead of his time.
They even interrupt each other.
What's so fascinating about Wells is this idea that we could almost study the future
and pauses.
Not like, fortune telling,
right?
But looking at trends, looking at possibilities.
Yeah.
And that's something that
I like that. Yeah. We can kind of get a handle on.
Yeah.
That right there.
So we're diving into his 1913 essay, The Discovery of the Future.
Okay.
To see how his ideas hold up in our modern world. And
isn't that wild?
How does the AI know where to put the
Isn't that wild? So the irony here is, if you've worked in like podcasting or audio production, even video production, how many hours humans have spent
taking
removing
the ums out. And now AI is putting them back in again.
And now it feels like such a waste of time, where that is the marker of authenticity, is the giving those audible mind gaps while thought process is taking place.
Yes.
I just did it right there, right? And now I'm very self-conscious of it. So
but this is what makes it feel so human. But just listening to that as well, you've got the editorializing. You've given it material and it provides a context. So the AI is deciding how to contextualize it, how to frame it in a way where it tells a particular story, going way beyond the material.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and you pick that up quickly, and as you said, you can spot issues with it the longer you sit with it. But I feel like, especially with maybe more known subjects or individuals, because there's so much more to draw on that's been in training data, right? Yep. I mean, H.G. Wells, so much of that information is one in public domain, but also historically available for everything. But but even again, putting stuff in like my own stuff or going through, on your Substack, just again grabbing different websites and different content for like schools or programs and dumping it in and then listening to what it says, you can catch these little weird. I think one of them I caught somewhere was the line was, they were trying to say like, I stopped and went, whoa, look at this. And it was really mechanical.
Right. Yes.
So thankfully it's not perfect yet.
But this is the first iteration. You've got to believe it's going to get substantially better than this.
Well, this is the worst version probably that they will release at least. And it's really interesting to see, because originally I've been following this space for some time, and also host a different podcast, Learning Futures podcast, where we were was hosting with Punya Mishra, so great colleague and friend, friend of the show, and all this kind of stuff, and we'll have him on here at some point. But we were doing some experimentation with Adobe, had some podcasting tools. And the idea was you could record your podcast in their tool and it would clean everything up and do all this stuff. But it whitewashed his Indian accent.
Wow.
Completely. It's he loves showing and kind of sharing it because it is so aggressively whitewashed.
Goodness.
It's quite comical. Like when setting aside the awful bias that's at play, what it's doing, but it was terrible. Right. And it was this really interesting. So it worked fine on my voice. And Punya would record and we play back his, and it sounded like some guy named Steve or, it was really.
And I'm laughing, but it is quite shocking.
Yeah. And that kind of goes back into some of these things that we always talk about with these tools is those.
But even ask yourself this. So you listen to those two hosts. What's the image you have in your mind of what they look like?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you the guy, I can see. He's got glasses, a big bushy beard, and kind of has more of like that hipster
interesting.
vibe.
So he doesn't have the beard in my head, but he's definitely white.
Yeah, he's definitely. They're both white in my mind, right? Which is also, again, it's playing down how we associate these voices with.
Right.
And what I would be curious, and I would like, because other tools like 11 Labs and other things, you can choose a variety of profiles. And I'm hoping that that'll be an evolution of the tool that will be able to either just completely randomize or intentionally select other sort of voice profiles that are more representative of.
But how do you feel if we get to the point where you can record yourself and the AI learns to emulate you? So now one of those characters is you.
Yeah. That's weird. Yeah. And you can do that.
You're
already.
Right. I know. We've already got the technology to do
11
that.
Labs, I just mentioned them. They will allow you, and I'm sure, hey, there's an AI for that. There's a tool every day, I feel like. But even 11 Labs, because they've been around for, as far as these AI tools go, it's been around forever, which means a couple of years. But they already offer that option where you can train it on yourself so that you can do exactly that. You can feed it text and have it read back as Andrew or read back as Sean.
So this is where people listening are going to be waiting for that little disclaimer at the end saying, this was brought to you by an AI. Now nobody's going to be sure.
We might be demonstrating that we can't do the banter as well enough so that
they're going to want the AI.
Oh my God, this is like the audio captcha. Like which one is AI? Well, if it's too good, it's not human. Well, I will say, at least for the this is our canary, okay? For the foreseeable future, this was not done with artificial intelligence.
Trust us.
The moment we stop saying that, perhaps there's your clue.
I don't know.
No, it's wild.
It is, but also this idea of persuasion. This is what really freaked me out about this: that you're being fed information which is hard to filter, it's easy to believe. And at the moment, I don't think there's any malintent here, but there are inaccuracies.
Yep.
How ripe is this for beginning to sort of nudge people to believe and think in certain ways that maybe aren't that healthy?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think always at play with these is questioning what am I getting?
Right.
Where is it coming from? But yeah, I mean, I think there's a major challenge with not just with audio, but this is another component because there's the visual elements, there's the text-based elements of, is this and if you use these tools long enough, you become very quickly aware of where their shortcomings are.
Right.
And that I just did this the other day. I was trying to get it to generate a citation for something that I wrote. Right. So I know it more than anybody. I put it in there and it keeps giving me the wrong date.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, come on. And then, but what that does for me anyways, it undermines my trust in the accuracy if I use it for something else.
That's right. Yes. Which is actually probably quite healthy.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But that's because I use these tools a lot.
Right.
And I think there is a danger of people who are going to be exposed to either the output or exposed to the platform without that sort of journey of seeing how these things have progressed and then take it as, because I think this has been a challenge ever since there's endless examples of ChatGPT, especially in the early days of it, of creating just wild nonsense things. Yep. But it does so with such a convincing.
See, that's it. Yes. And even if you look at OpenAI's evaluation of the safety of these platforms, their system cards, they actually take this area of persuasion really seriously. And they ask, is their technology so good that it can begin to nudge people, and where are the dangers there? And it's actually very gratifying to see that they take it seriously enough that they work out where the danger points are and how to pull away from them.
Yeah, and that's incredibly important because, as we've talked before, this idea, of unintended consequences and being careful.
Right.
Because, a tool can be, no technology is neutral. Right. I mean, it carries with it all of the imbued biases and things that are, it's a mirror. It's the
sum of its human parts.
That's exactly it, right? Yeah. It's a reflection of who created it. But with that is also being very careful about not giving. I think the way I've expressed it before is not giving the myth to the technology, right?
Yes,
like not accepting that it is better because it is.
Right. Yes.
And really challenging that and being careful about it. And I think, and I don't know if this is one of those things where I see it, so now I see it everywhere. But I don't remember a time previous to ChatGPT where I saw the word delve so much, And I'll be curious in a couple of years' time to look back and look at the word graphs and see where like ChatGPT was announced in, fall of 22 or whatever. And then all of a sudden in the English language, the word delve making this monumental appearance.
Yeah. No, and I think we're actually seeing other things. So something we may cover in a later podcast, I've actually been playing with ChatGPT to write novels in a fairly sophisticated level. And at the moment, what I'm finding is its use of metaphor is rather limited. So I've now got this 15,000 word novel, and the number of times chest appears in terms of his chest tightened. He felt sort of this tension in his chest.
Pain in the chest.
But it's, ChatGPT is obsessed with about 4 different sort of parts of the body in terms of how it captures emotion.
It's like, somewhere and there's a code that's like, only reference code for chest, leg, or head.
Right. Yes. So there are still these tells, but I think it's getting better. But I actually want to go back to the purpose of this and remembering that this is an experimental feature.
Yes.
Google are just trying it out. What are your thoughts on the idea of these audio summaries? Do you think a podcast style summary actually is helpful or not helpful?
I think it's helpful. And I think especially, so one of the things I like specifically, let me fork my answer with one saying, I don't like the idea of just being like, we'll just create a podcast in lieu of doing anything else. I don't know if that's necessarily that helpful, but podcasting is hard enough. I mean, we're trying to, we don't need a machine to take that over. Yeah. But using it in the way that the Notebook LM thing, I think is really interesting because again, the way that whole tool was set up was using that as one element in addition to all these other summaries and queries.
Yes.
And I think that is powerful because I think that starts to lean into also helping, again, diversify the way we as humans learn.
Yes.
We're not all visual learners. We don't all retain information as good as when we read it as we do when we listen to it.
Which is really important, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm a very audible learner. I can, I'll have these flashbacks. So I will remember where I was and what I was doing when I hear something that I listened to before.
Right.
It'll bring me right back to that moment. And I think it's, it presenting, and this will be the long-term factor for me, will be, again, if it can retain that accuracy of what you gave it, so that it's not making up facts about centers and things that don't exist.
And it comes back to how trustworthy is it? How much trust can you invest in it?
Yeah. And I think if the trust can be maintained to a level of accuracy that's acceptable, meaning it's not, you can have fun with the fuzzy parts, the metaphors, you can have, but with the factual information, that needs to be accurate.
Yep.
And in that way, I think that is a useful way, because I could see, even just as like a study guide or a learning aid, you could take content information, drop it in there, and learn it yet another way.
Right.
That wasn't done, because,
Yep.
So I don't know. I mean, I think I like it in two ways. I like it in that direction. But I would be very cautious about this idea of like, well, we'll just turn it into a podcast because that's going to be better.
Yep.
I don't know if that's true.
I'm really tempted to try this out with my students. Not that we should be experimenting with students, but just
we always get IRBs.
Yes, just to underline that. But just in terms of thinking about assignments, setting them an experimental assignment where they capture their notes on something, so they've got sort of their rough, unformed, unstructured notes, and then they ask Notebook LM to create a podcast out of it. I would be really interested to see how that works.
I think even I would agree. And I think one other piece that would be interesting, also just as an observation, is let's say we have, to make things easy, we have 10 students or 100, a nice round number. They all put the same course provided study guide, whatever, into this thing. Generate a podcast and to look at the differences between the podcasts that are made.
Interesting.
I'd be curious, like what the variance is between those, if it's being fed the same content and what it does with that. Because, I'm not sure with that particular tool, if it takes into account the other pieces that you are adding into it, or the query, the conversation that you're having. I don't know how much that would, how much that is taken into account.
Yeah,
I don't know.
So it feels actually like a lot more research is needed into both how it's working, but also you can see avenues for developing it as well.
Yeah. No, I think it's really fast. Well, it's certainly one to pay attention to, because
it is, and play around with it. It's so 100%. Easy to play with.
Yep, it's very easy. It's very fun, and it's quick. So, and again, if you ever are having a down day, throw in some information about yourself, and
Sean, you're the man.
It's like the daily affirmations. Right. So one other thing Andrew, I wanted to pick your brain about today, is there's I suppose, like many weeks, it has not been slow with AI news and things like that. But recently, we also have OpenAI's GPT-4 O1 Strawberry. OpenAI
O1, I think is.
That's the way we're supposed to say it?
Yeah, so it's like a reset.
Okay,
yes.
O1. Yes. And I was thinking about that. Do you think they use the O instead of a 0 so that it's... Okay, this is going to go out to all of our programmer nerd friends here, because when you write the number 401, it does camel case, which is very similar for like when we, in coding to use camel case so you can see things when they're. And I'm like, is that the reason? I wonder.
I have no idea. I'm sure I've read something about their rationale, but I'm not going to hallucinate and make it up. That's your proof that I'm not an AI.
We'll crowdsource that. Somebody knows. Tell us.
Yeah.
So Strawberry, the claim is right that it's not a new model. It's just
well, actually, it's a different sort of architecture. So you've got this built-in chain of thought reasoning, and so this idea of getting an LLM like ChatGPT to reason through its response,
do something very complex.
It's been around for a while, and people have discovered you can write prompts which force it to sort of go through this logical process. What they've done is they've tweaked the architecture of the model so that is built in. So whatever you ask it, it'll not only go through a logical sequence of thinking, I'm thinking inverted commas, through how to respond, how to sort of parse out the question, and then how to construct the answer. But you can actually see its steps, which is the really cool bit.
Yeah,
yes.
And because there's an inherent black box with these. You throw your query in and you get something, but you don't get to see, especially with something complex that we know as humans when we're working through these, that it's not a one shot. That it's like, first you must do this, then you must do that, then you must do this to get at what you're going for.
Yep.
And that's the promise, right? That it breaks this down and show. Have you had? I have not experimented with it much.
I've played around with it and I was impressed.
Okay.
Especially, it's got a very different feel, very different vibe to it than GPT 4.0.
Okay.
But in terms of just seeing the process that it goes through, I found it absolutely fascinating. And it does lead to more robust answers. It's not accurate all the time still. But certainly that reasoning process, I think it does advance things. Perhaps more importantly, we're beginning to see the evolution of these systems. So we started off with fairly simple LLMs. We're now beginning to create a more sophisticated architecture and beginning to create a whole ecosystem around them. So you can actually have AIs where, even though the fundamental technology isn't extending that much, we're beginning to create more robust artificial entities, if you like, out of them.
Yeah. No, I think it's fascinating. I think, as we sit here waiting for, the inevitable Chat GPT 5 or whatever.
Whatever that will look like.
I don't know.
And there are huge questions around whether this is sort of a progression which is going to continue, or whether we're sort of hitting some limits with the technology and we need another breakthrough.
Yeah. And I think, and that's an interesting, so I'm glad you brought that up, because that segues us into the last sort of bit I had on my notes here to talk about today, was this announcement from Fei Li, who has earned the name, the AI godmother, sort of. I've never heard if she likes that term or not. I don't know.
It's a little weird, but I mean, it mirrors Jeff Hinton sort of being called the Godfather.
Sure.
Yes.
But so she recently made a headline news. There was a Wired article that I think did a really interesting job sort of explaining this, but has created an AI startup called World Labs. And it just raised like $230 million, and it's worth, I don't know. I don't understand how this works, but it's valued at over $1 billion already, even though they've not done
and you've got people like Reid Hoffman investing in it and really promoting it.
But I think the learning about it, I think the exciting piece, and this is my question to you, is whether or not this idea of moving beyond the sort of generative AI landscape that we have so far, and thinking about an AI tool that can create virtual worlds, essentially. So if you take the normal sort of generative AI as it is today, thinking of that as a very flat two-dimensional experience, this idea of creating an AI that can build, air quote, physical worlds.
Right, yes. And actually trying to understand the nature
relationship,
and structure.
right? That these things, that these items can exist in each other's spaces.
Yes,
So I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah. There are, I think, 2 or 3 things about this which are intriguing. I have no idea whether this venture is going to succeed. And it actually feels similar to other ventures we've seen that are pushing things towards artificial general intelligence, including Elon Musk's X.AI, where they're trying to develop these AI systems that can really begin to explore the physical world and provide new insights. I don't think we have enough insights at the moment to know whether this is possible, but I think this is really exciting frontier research. And the thing that it shows me is that even though we've all been obsessed with generative AI over the last 18 months, 2 years, that is just one stepping stone towards the future of AI. Anybody who thinks that generative AI is is wrong. And they are going to be blindsided by what comes along. The really interesting stuff is looking at 1, 2, 3, 10 steps beyond generative AI, asking how can we create new architectures? How can we create new models? How can we even create new chips and new chip architectures to create an artificial intelligence that is fundamentally different from what we've created so far? And I think that initiatives like this are really beginning to push those boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this idea, I think the term that was used a lot to describe this is spatial intelligence.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I think that's really exciting because if you think about it, it's essentially this AI that has the ability to understand and navigate a physical world. Right?
Yes.
And then, so kind of tying in what your last point there and also making a tie into other things we've talked about before. As H.G. Wells says with Humanities, it's not done. This isn't the final product. There's so much more to go. But there was a moment too when I was kind of looking into what this would mean in terms of this sort of, again, if we go back to the analogy of what was 2D and now we're going into a 3D AI space, is this idea of, have we already done this? Is this like some recursive nightmare where we're discovering the boundaries of the simulation to which we're already living in?
Are we actually living in a simulation?
I don't know.
Yes, and this is foreshadowing at least one episode sort of further on where we'll talk about this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not a great simulation theory fan. I think there are a lot of flaws until something like this comes along and we start talking about how to actually sort of take steps towards building the simulation.
And there's a great, for those who enjoy it, it's not for everybody. There's a great episode of Rick and Morty where it's the same thing. They discuss there's a pocket universe and a pocket universe and a pocket universe and a pocket universe. And that's the thing is like that self-discovery.
Pocket universe is all the way down.
That's it, right? You start to build the same technology that affirms the fact that you are in fact in it.
Right. Yes.
And it's like, and that can be kind of wild and crazy.
Right. But even just pulling back from there, so nothing as crazy as we're all living in a simulation. You look at the confluence between these really advanced frameworks and ways of thinking about AI and human robots.
Yep.
So again, this is something we'll come back to, but it blows my mind that 2 years ago, most people would have said, why build humanoid robots? Stupid idea.
Yeah.
You build a robot to do a task. You don't need them to look like humans. And now it seems everybody is building humanoid robots. And we're on the cusp of having accessible, affordable human robots that we can use in the home as well as industry.
And
so
what could possibly go wrong?
But you put that together not only with advanced LLM-based systems like ChatGPT, but the next level of AI, which is trained to actually learn about physical environments from physical environments.
Yep.
So now you get embedded AI in this physical body. It just changes everything.
It's a complete paradigm shift of how everything has. And that raises with me just instant excitement and curiosity, then quickly followed by,
Yep.
Is this a good idea?
So I've got to tell you, my first thought was, can we raise the money to buy one of these first robots for the Future of Being Human initiative?
If there's anyone out there listening
that wants to donate one
or knows somebody at Boston Dynamics or somewhere who can get us that new humanoid, we'll take one. I think this would be, we'll invite it to the table here. I think
we will enroll it in class. It can sit there and be a participant.
Someone must be able to connect us with. We need a robot. We need a robot.
Yes,
that's fantastic. Well, this again, what an amazing conversation, Andrew. So again, thank you so much. This is so much fun.
This was great, my robot AI friend, with your little earpiece telling you how great you are.
Sean is the best, and so are you, Andrew.
I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, again, from myself and from Andrew, thank you all for sticking with us. We'll drop a bunch of the little links and things, stuff we were talking about in the show notes so you can catch up and also catch up with all of our other work along Andrew's Substack, our website, and all kinds of YouTube channel, all kinds of fun places where you can, just continue to hang out with us.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you again, and we'll see you next time on Modem Futura.
See you.
Demodulating signal.
Modem Futura is a production of the Future of Being Human initiative at Arizona State University. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. To learn more about the Future of Being Human initiative and all of our other projects, please visit us on the web at futureofbeinghuman.asu.edu.
End transmission.